Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Saturday edition of Agree or Disagree, the podcast, Hockey Edition. My name is Kevin Olenek. You can follow me on Twitter, of course, at KEVULE. You can subscribe to all podcasts on iTunes and Spotify by searching Agree or Disagree, the podcast. You can add me as a friend on Facebook, Kevin Olenek. You can like the Facebook page, Agree or Disagree, the podcast, and much, much more. Today, we are recording with Tyler Noble as we recap what happened in the land of Vancouver, and Mitch Milani will be joining us a little bit later on in the podcast to recap the playoffs as we are delving into the first round here of the National Hockey League playoffs. Day 4 as we're recording. Tonight, Matt DeBorg and I will be recapping the Game 2 of the Colorado Avalanche and Calgary Flames game. What happens there? The Flames won 4-0 Game 1, so we'll see what happens there. Sean and Heidi are not able to join us. Sean was having some technical issues, and Heidi's lost her voice, which is very unfortunate for that to happen, because it is only one day into the playoffs. You cannot lose your voice, but she did. But we started this podcast off with the comments from Jim Benning at his end of the season press conference, which got some anger in Canuck land. So let's have a listen to that as we start.
Upgrades on defense, we'd like to do that.
And in that letter that Francesco Aquilini wrote and sent out, he said that he wished that the team was further along in its rebuild program. Mm-hmm. Why do you think the team is not?
Well, I think, we took a big step this year. If you look at where we're at the start of the year, I think there's a lot of hope for our team. You see our young players, the year Petey had, the year Bess had. Bo, I think, took another step. These are 20, 21-year-old kids, Quinn's 19 playing, and you look at when teams get good and when they win with 26 to 35-year-old players. So these are our best players. So I think, I'm excited about the future. I'm excited about what happened this year and the growth of those young players, and looking forward to training camp. We have lots of work to do this summer to continue to add to this group to get to the next step, but we're going to do the work and hopefully we get there.
Jim, those two areas you identified, Pearson's a nice get.
So, Tyler, maybe just your comments on kind of what you heard there. This did not excite Canuck media, or Canucks media, did not excite Canucks social media. When Jim Benning said the 26 to 35-year-old, maybe just your reaction to what Benning said and overall kind of some of the things you heard in that press conference.
Yeah, I mean, to answer the question of why are they not further along, I mean, the easy answer there would be injuries has really derailed their progress at various times. He didn't want to use that as an excuse, which I give him credit for. But, there is something to be said about experience and that translating to making the playoffs and having success in the playoffs. It seems like nowadays everybody just has this expectation that a big-name young gun can come in and they just have all the tools and all the know-how to win in the playoffs, and it doesn't work like that. It takes a while to figure out how to grind out wins and keep moving up the standings and secure a spot and manage the grind of a stretch drive and then carrying that through into the playoffs. And as far as injuries go, I mean, that speaks to the Canucks' depth. And Jim talked about wanting to keep adding players, and they aren't deep enough to withstand injuries, especially at key positions such as center ice or in your top 4 defense. And we saw down the stretch with the Canucks, there was a bit of a revolving door of different D-men that they were given a try, just hoping somebody would stand out. So, yeah, more patience is required. I know that's not what people want to hear, but it really is the way forward for the Canucks. And I don't think Jim Benning's lacking comfort with his job, because the owner's been asking for patience too.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I think is important to recognize here is I feel like Travis Green probably articulated this better than what Jim Benning did, in that there's a step to get into the playoffs, and once you get into the playoffs, it takes a while to learn how to win. And if you don't believe me or you don't believe what they're saying, look at the Washington Capitals, look at the Pittsburgh Penguins, and look at this year's Tampa Bay Lightning. It is hard to win the Stanley Cup. It's not an easy thing. Yes, there have been teams that have got to the finals, like the Nashville Predators and the Los Angeles Kings from 8th place, but it's a rarity for that to happen. It is a grind to win this thing, and they say it is the toughest trophy to win in professional sports for a reason, because you need to have that experience to do it.
You need to have the talent. You need to have the experience. You need to just have a lot of things go right. You need to have some luck. Of course, the officiating in the playoffs can be such a wild card sometimes. You need to have a lot go right. You need to have a good system. You need to have good belief in that system. And, sometimes a matchup just isn't a good matchup. I'm not writing Tampa Bay off yet, but they just don't look like a good match against Columbus at all. And is it just the matchup, or is it that Tampa Bay has basically been playing meaningless hockey for a couple of months, 3 months, and now they're trying to flip the switch and having trouble with that? I don't know. But there's no automatics in any kind of playoff, but especially the NHL.
Yeah, and even when you look back at that 2011 run, it was about depth, and let's not forget that almost didn't happen because there was a 3-0 lead blown that could have by the Chicago Blackhawks, and if it wasn't for an Alex Burrows overtime goal, that wouldn't have happened. So there's so much that goes into getting to the Stanley Cup final that I fear like this exact science theory and the analytics theory that this happens and then this happens and this happens, there may be some truth to it, but I think that there's other factors, the intangibles of this, I think play into it. And that's where I think the Canucks management and Canucks culture is trying to explain to this fan, like, be patient as we grow. Now, the question it comes down to, can this fan base be patient enough? I do think that there's a fair expectation to be in the playoffs, or at very least do what Montreal did and compete for a playoff spot next year. Mm-hmm. But in terms, that's the question: is how patient can this fan base be?
Well, the Canucks have been testing it for a while now, and I mean the crowds are not. I wouldn't say they're very good crowds. If you watch on TV, there's a lot of empty seats, clearly. But as long as the product on the ice is not dreadful, as in there's chances exchanged, some good saves, some good plays, some exciting names, some exciting players. If there's excitement to be had going to a game, then I think you can buy some patience that way. If the product is exciting, that helps. Going back a couple of years ago, they were losing, finishing near the bottom, and the hockey was just god-awful hockey, right? Like that's a tougher sell, but it's not like that now. So I think people are okay with the way it's trending. I mean, there's always going to be a degree of impatience everywhere. I'm sure there's people in the Toronto Maple Leafs fan base that are getting impatient with 52 years since the last Cup win. Right. I mean, you have to, when you're in a leadership position running a multi-million-dollar organization, you can't be, folding to the pressure to take shortcuts.
Yeah. And that's one thing I am a little bit concerned with the draft in Vancouver and sort of everything that's going to happen. We'll get into the lottery part here in a second. But in terms of what I hope Benning doesn't pull what a Chiarelli did earlier in this year, where he made about 18 trades for guys that had no opportunity really to be on the team and just made trades for the sake of trades. I'm hoping that Benning and this management group is rather thoughtful in the offseason who they bring in. And they don't necessarily feel this need that they have to overpay for a high-priced free agent. Or there is a balance here, right?
Well, I'm sure they wouldn't want another Louis Eriksson type of situation where they spend a big money on a free agent, and then he ends up being. I mean, at one point he was giving the Canucks 0 because he was a healthy scratch. That's how bad the signing was.
Yeah.
So, and we've seen this in other places. I mean, Milan Lucic hasn't been a healthy scratch to my knowledge, but he's pretty close to giving them 0 for big money as well. And this has happened in all kinds of different places. I think they'll be probably a little bit gun shy about making such a signing again at this point. And really, I mean, I've said this before on the podcast, the Jim Benning and the Canucks are not in a position right now where they have to hit a home run on a trade or a free agent signing.
No. But it would be nice to. I think the fan base would like to see a higher impact trade, but not a huge. They don't necessarily have to hit a home run. A couple of other things I did want to bring up here that I thought was interesting. This idea that we'll start with the Virtanen comment, because there was a question about putting Virtanen with Pettersson and Besser. And this idea that I think is interesting, and I don't know if I've heard Travis Green say this before, but the idea of having both a winger play both sides, I thought was an interesting comment. And I mean, I guess you can see that because I think Tanner Pearson can play both sides. Josh Levo can play both sides. I haven't seen Virtanen play much on the left side, but I thought that was interesting. There's something interesting that I think looking forward, I think I was interested in that.
Yeah, it's different as a winger versus a defenseman switching sides. I mean, with defense, you really want to be on the same side as your shot for a lot of reasons. But with wing, it's a little more interchangeable. I mean, really, a lot of teams, when you get into the attacking zone, it's 3 forwards out there rotating around anyways. If you're playing on your opposite wing, you set up some of those one-timer opportunities. You're playing on the same wing, that gives you some different options there as well. And your own end playing on the same side helps, I think, for breaking out. But with wingers, it's not that big a deal, in my opinion, to be switching sides.
Yeah.
So it's worth it for the coach to explore all those possibilities and see what works.
Yeah. I thought the comment in there too was in order for Virtanen to play with, I'm not saying that's something we should look forward to, but in order to play for Virtanen to play with Pettersson and Besser, he needs to develop his game more. So I do think that this is a really important offseason for Jake Virtanen. But I also thought what was interesting is what they said about Sven Berchi, which I think the fan base and the media sort of gave him a pass because of the concussions. And Travis Green had a little bit of a different comment in that he said he was talking about he expects Sven Berchi to come in almost in better shape and with a better commitment.
Yeah, it does make you wonder what that's about, eh?
Yeah, that was really fascinating to me because the way that I took it is it sounded to me. I don't want to put words in Travis Green's mouth, but it sounded to me like Green had this perception that Berchi could have been back much sooner than he was.
Yeah.
I know it's a concussion. It's
more
difficult.
Follow-up questions there and get Sven's take on that, I guess, to really know for sure what he's referring to there.
Yeah. I did think that was sort of one of those understated things that was talked about that didn't get enough conversation or play in the media or in the news this week. Is I'm going to be really interesting to see. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with Sven Berchi going forward. It's knowing him back in Calgary. There were some interesting questions about commitment. I'm not saying that they're there or they're not. I just think that it's very interesting. It's very interesting going forward what's going to happen with Sven Berchi. Then on Tuesday, the lottery happened, and lo and behold, for the Vancouver Canucks, Tyler, they don't move up. Nope, they moved down again for the fourth straight year. They actually moved down from the place that they actually were. They are now 10th. And kind of what was your reaction to the lottery? Were you 10th? How are you feeling?
I mean, you're hopeful to move into the top 3, but being at the percentage level that they were going into it. I mean, you don't have high expectations. Not like in previous years where they had the second or third worst record and a really big percentage of moving up to the first pick. So different expectations going in. To fall one spot from 9th to 10th, I mean, how much of a difference is that really going to make?
Yeah.
And then the last year, I mean, that happened to them last year, dropping from 6th to 7th, I believe, and they still got Quinn Hughes.
Right, yep.
It's a guy they would have taken if they were still in the 6th position. And going back the year before, they get Elias Pettersson after dropping, 2 spots, I think? 2 or 3? So I don't know. I like to use the phrase, you make your own luck. And I think that even though they haven't had much luck with the ping pong balls and the lottery machine, they've still been scouting well and drafting well and identifying a player that fits with their overall vision for the team, even if they don't communicate that vision very clearly in the media. They seem to be getting players that they like in terms of a fit and want, as opposed to just taking the next highest ranked guy off the board.
Yeah, I think it's
because you see that, right? Like you see that sometimes the teams that are picking first or second. It doesn't matter how they fit into what they've already got. They're taking that guy because he's the best player available. Period.
Yeah,
and then there's times that doesn't work out for teams.
Yeah, and there was a conversation this week on one of the radio stations. I can't remember. About the idea of giving up 4 first-round picks for Mitch Marner. And they did some statistics, and the average is about, they looked through, and the amount of first-round picks on a team is not actually as high as we think. And so it is really about a holistic approach to the draft. I mean, yeah, the top 3 is expected to be that franchise game-changer guy, but that's not always the case, right? So it is about doing your scouting, you're doing your preparation, thinking and all of that. So, I mean, we'll see what happens with the Canucks going forward. In the 10th pick, we are going to be talking to some prospect experts as we go on. I think the fan base here is hoping for Bowen Byram, and I think that's going to be a really tough thing because it looks like he's kind of in a top 5 at this point in time, and especially if they get to the Memorial Cup, there's going to be a lot more eyes on him. So I think that will be interesting. But we'll kind of dig into that a little bit more. Are you kind of thinking, though, you're hoping best player, or are you thinking they need to prioritize one position over another?
It still feels to me like they need to add to their defense. But, if Olli Juolevi could finally work out for them, then the defense will look a lot better. Right? Yeah. But still a bit of an unknown there. I mean, I'm not writing him off yet or calling him a bust because he's been set back by injuries. But if he doesn't work out, that will certainly set things back for the Canucks and increase that need for adding defense. So I don't know. Yeah, I'd have to lean towards defense. I think it's a little bit easier to find helpful wingers through trades and what have you, but solidifying the future of your defense, especially in the top 4, is so crucial.
Yeah. What do you think of let's put the entertainment. I actually do want to talk about the entertainment portion of lottery. Sure. But what do you actually think about the lottery format? Like, are you on the Brian Burke train that it's time for a change?
Well, I just don't know that it's stopping tanking. That's the only thing, right? I mean, there's still nobody comes out and admits it because you get disciplined by the league if you did. But I mean, let's look at Edmonton, for example. I mean, were they really trying to get back in the playoff picture down the stretch? I mean, they can all say that they were, but it didn't. The effort there makes me wonder whether they really were, trying to get back into the playoff chase. I mean, once it was clear they weren't going to make it, they're out there and playing and trying to get some wins, but it's not the same thing. It's not a tooth and nail battle like a playoff chase.
Right.
And mean, the players all, especially the ones that are signed for quite a number of years. I mean, they know what's up. They know if they improve their chances of moving up in the lottery, that's a good thing for the future. I mean, so I don't know. I mean, we saw years ago. I mean, Buffalo was blatantly doing it. Blatantly trying to get the best percentage, and so I don't know. I'm open to change. I'm not sure what the best way is. I mean, it's clear that they need some kind of a system to safeguard against intentionally losing to finish last. But we can't have a system that keeps rewarding failure. And it kind of feels that way sometimes.
But right now it feels like the system isn't rewarding failure per much. It's the New Jersey Devils were not the worst team in the league, and they've been able to bump up twice. 2 of the last 3 years they've got the first pick, and they were not in the bottom 5 in the league. So
yeah, but what was their payroll? Like, are they being cheap and just not making the playoffs because of that, and then they're in the lottery and being rewarded for mediocrity? Let's say, like that's fair. Like, to me, I think maybe there's instead of having the highest ones have the highest chance for the number 1 pick, either all 15 have the same amount of opportunity to get that it's all percentage, and you just draw up whoever gets the first pick gets the first pick, and you just put them all in the same. Or I'd find that interesting.
I think
because you're asking about entertainment value. I mean, if you take all the non-playoff teams, say you have an equal opportunity at picking first. Oof.
Yeah, totally. That's
or you could do the whole non-playoff team, the first 15 picks, and draft all of that.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know. That might be too. I mean, that's taking it to the other extreme, but. I mean, the way it is set up now is that because the percentages do increase as you get further towards the bottom, it does, in some cases, seem to encourage teams to bottom out.
But because how did the Philadelphia Flyers and the Chicago Blackhawks and even the Carolina Hurricanes last year get this big jump? Like that's the part that I find confusing is how's a team from 15 get up to jump to number 3 when 4, 5, or 7, 8, and 9 can only move up 3 spots? Like there's something weird about that part of it that I don't quite get.
Well, I mean, the more often that happens, the more I guess you might see teams willing to buy at the trade deadline as opposed to selling, right? Like Columbus did this, and they got in. God bless them, they did, and they're leading in their playoff series. But that was a risky course of action at the trade deadline to load up when it looked like they might not make it.
Yeah,
and but if you're them and you say, well, if we fall short, there's still some possibility of moving up in the draft because we've seen this happen with other teams, and maybe that moves the needle towards buying at the trade deadline.
Yeah. Or another idea that is just popping in my head is I wonder if there's a way that you can make it that you could trade your percentage in some way. Like, can I put that as part of the trade? Okay, I'll trade a lottery option. I don't know how that works per se, but that would be kind of interesting to put that as, okay, I won't trade a first round pick, but I'll trade my percentages up or something like that. That would be kind of interesting, I think. Yeah.
I don't know. Overall, though, I mean, we see on some occasions the team with the worst record still gets to pick first in the draft. We see on other occasions where they don't. We see it's fairly random as far as teams that are, lower than 9th or 10th in terms of worst record. They get to move into the top 3. I mean, I think there's enough randomness to it as it is now to say that it's legitimate, but frustrating, obviously, for the teams that never seem to have the luck go their way.
Yeah. But in terms of the entertainment part of this, in terms of like the overall show that the NHL puts on, I don't know about you, but I've seen, I would love to hear Heidi's take on this too. But there's always the jokes about how there's too many white people in a room sometimes, and they post those on social media. That was such an incredible example of a bunch of old, grumpy white men that were not happy to be sitting in that room.
Yeah, it's a little bit forced and awkward in terms of having them all sit there. I mean, I'd like it if they were. I don't know. I mean, you can have them in a room, maybe show a couple of shots of them in a room, just kind of socializing, hanging out, waiting to hear the results. And then when you want to interview one or two of them, you can trot them out into the studio or whatever. But just to have them, to have them sitting there on the set, all stiff, the lights are on, shining in their face. They go shot by shot. You got Catherine Tappan there introducing them one by one. I mean, that was just a little bit rigid, I think. But we're nitpicking here.
Well, I mean, like, why didn't the Philadelphia Flyers bring Gritty? You know what I mean? Like, there is some...
Because the NHL rejected Finn at one point, didn't they?
They did, too. That, like, it's just, I mean, like, wouldn't it be great if, like you could bring, like, some fan celebrity type or opportunity where, it just, like... For example, get the Devils fan is happy to get the number one seat. You see them pumping their fists and just something with a little bit more energy. It just felt like church.
I don't think Gary Bettman takes it very well when you mock his gimmicks. Okay, like if it's going to be gimmicky, it's going to be gimmicky because the NHL says so, not because an individual team wants to, thumb their nose at the idea.
But you can just bring some more energy into a really good thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's where I'm kind of thinking.
I think there'd be some entertaining head coaches that would, if you sent them. Oh, that would make things entertaining.
Yeah. Can you imagine Torch at a lottery?
Yeah, like I'm just trying to think of this year. Like who would be great? Like I mean, if Ken Hitchcock was there, I mean, he's always good for a good quote.
Yeah.
Like like that could be interesting. How about I mean, I guess they fired Guy Boucher, so he can't go, but from Ottawa there. But just trying to think of some other non-playoff teams. I guess that is one of the issues, right? Is that how can you send a head coach when a lot of times the teams that miss the playoffs, those coaches are fired?
Well, how do you send an interim general manager when you just said in the day before that you're not sure you're going to hire that interim general manager for the job?
No.
Right beside him, Bob Nicholson, Keith Gretzky. Yeah. That's not awkward at all.
No.
But yeah, it's just it's got to be a way to make that a lot more entertaining in some ways. But we'll see. The other thing that happened that created a little bit of controversy this week in Canuck land was the Utica Comets, and this was brought up a little bit in the press conference. This has been brought up during the week, but Jim Benning announced this week that they are not making any changes to the management core. Ryan Johnson and Trent Call will continue to be in the Utica Comets head coach GM combination there. Call the head coach, Johnson the GM. But there has been some concern about what happened in Utica. The expectations next year going in for Utica, what are you hoping, expecting?
I'm hoping that they won't be decimated so much. I mean, we talked about that with Corey a few podcasts ago. I mean, they didn't have much chance at success when their defense was so depleted between guys called up to the Canucks and guys injured.
Yeah, that's one thing.
So if they can, I mean, if that's even marginally better situation, then things will be better for the Comets.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I would point to.
Yeah. There was a lot of criticism pointed towards Trent Cull and what he's up to. What were your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know enough in depth as to, some of the individual decisions that he's making. I mean, it's a farm system. It's about experimentation, like if he's trying different things and they're suffering some losses because of it. I mean, why are we so obsessed with Utica's record? Like if it's year after year after year, and I guess some people are saying, well, they're never having any success. I don't know. They made a Calder Cup run when Markstrom was their goalie. They haven't had a Markstrom-like goalie since, I don't think.
Yeah.
There was Demko, but I've never thought that Demko was better than Markstrom. But I might be in the minority on that one.
Well, I think that it sounds like the debate here is between what is the role of the Utica Comets? Is the role to develop players into the Canucks system or to win? And what is the motivation of Trent Cull? Is his motivation to win or develop the players, right? Is he trying to get into a head coaching job in the National Hockey League a la his John Cooper? Or
yeah, well, I think the goal is to be competitive in order to develop the players to join the Canucks. But competitive doesn't, that's different than winning at all, must win or winning at all costs, or we must be a AHL playoff team or must get this far in the AHL playoffs. I mean, competitive to me is different than you got to win. Competitive, you can put a competitive game together and still lose, just because the other team made a few more plays than you did. But I don't know. I don't think it's the priority is the Utica Comets have to win per se.
No, I think I think it is about the development of the players, and I think there is some work that certainly needs to be done over the year, over the off season, and that I think a lot of it does speak to what happened with the Canucks is the depth issue with this team. I think we're seeing that in Utica Comets. I think that's more of an issue than anything else.
Well, and then when the Canucks decided to demote Sam Gagner at the start of the season, they didn't assign him to the Comets. They assigned him to the Marlies.
Yeah, as
a favor, and I wonder how much, if at all, that factored into the Josh Levo deal and what they were able to swing there on a trade. If it was, like Benning did a favor for the Marlies, providing them with Gagner or whatever. But that was a move, I think, out of good relations with Gagner and his agent, and with the Marlies and with the Maple Leafs. Didn't help the Comets though.
Right.
That's like if you look at the depth chart. Well, there's a guy that if he's not going to play for the Canucks would help the farm team, except he's not helping the farm team because he's not playing on the farm team.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of questions and a lot of things that I think that they're going to look at in the off season for that. But the focus right now is the NHL playoffs. And it has certainly been an interesting start on a number of levels. I think that everybody's playoff bracket is feeling a little bit panicked right now with the Tampa Bay Lightning. But I think that there's also a little bit panic out in the land of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And joining us from the Bottom Line View / Hot Take Hockey to come on and talk a little bit about the playoffs with us is Mitch Milani. Mitch, what is going on?
Yeah, man, it's been rough these last couple of days.
Yeah, Mitch with the Bottom Line View, I will always remember this because after the Sunday night victory of the Detroit Lions decimating the New England Patriots, Mitch Milani went on the YouTube channel and basically broke down the problem with every single player on the New England Patriots. Are you prepared to do that with the Pittsburgh Penguins right now, or where are you?
I don't know if it's necessarily a player issue. I can't pinpoint exactly what it is. I think some of it is players, obviously. Some of it is strategy and what they're doing and certain line combinations that I don't think are working. And then I think a big part of it is New York, and not necessarily the Islanders, but where they're playing the game.
What do you mean, like the fans? The
fans. If you've seen any of these games, the last two games between the Islanders and the Penguins, there has been a drastic difference between the Islander fans and the Tampa Bay fans, the Washington fans, the San Jose fans. Like, the Islanders have the best home ice advantage as far as I'm concerned right now. It's been absolutely insane. They can't stop chanting for more than, 2 seconds. Like, they start a new chant every minute. So I think that's played in part to the Islanders' style of a physical game, a fast game, and a game that the Penguins, it's throwing off what they want to do. And I think the Islanders they're just playing really well right now. They're outworking the Penguins. I think once it goes back to Pittsburgh, it might be different, but that's why I'm here. We'll talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to forget that the Islanders are the higher seed in this series because of who they're playing and some of the names there and the Stanley Cups and all that. But, I mean, watching on TV, that is awfully intimidating looking, and the Islanders are playing with a lot of confidence because of it.
Yeah. So I want to ask this awkward question because we haven't talked about it all year. But one of the names that we have not said a lot this year overall is Sidney Crosby. Like, we have not talked about Sidney Crosby much this year at all. Have we? Yep. What is going on there?
What do you mean?
Like, is he no points last night?
I think it's just he had another 100-point season. I think it's just like every season. So he's just Sidney Crosby. Like, we just expect what he's doing at this point to happen. So nothing like overly fantastic has happened. Even if he would go out there and win the scoring title and the Hart Trophy, like one of these years, it wouldn't matter because it's just, it's Sidney Crosby. It doesn't matter. He's one of the greatest players of all time. When it comes to these last two games, I thought he played poorly in the first game, but last game I thought he was their best forward on the ice. He's the only guy that was really dangerous and getting some opportunities overall, and that's been pretty much the entire season. He's been really, really good. I think this past season Crosby has played as good as he's ever played, especially on the defensive side of the ice where he's up for the Selke Trophy. I don't think he'll win it, but he's been fantastic on both ends of the ice. He's even playing shorthanded a little bit more than he has in the past. I don't exactly know what you mean. I just think Crosby is at this point where he's not really this personality that's going to put himself out there and make you talk about him. It's just it's hockey, really.
Well, I mean, and we could say, have we talked about it as Alexander Ovechkin much this year?
No, that's true. And he win the Rocket? He is going to win the Rocket Richard, right? Yeah, he hung on and beat Draisaitl.
But again, Ovechkin always wins the Rocket Richard, so it's not really a storyline at this point. Yeah. It's just how many does he have and how many more does he have to win. And then for Ovechkin, he just won the Cup, so there's no pressure on him to do anything. Like at this point, Crosby and Ovechkin, they're solidified. There's no pressure for them to do anything. I think the bigger stories are, the Islanders, the Leafs, of course, and all these other teams that they have the pressure and they're kind of bigger stories and more recent stories there, so that's why people are kind of grasping.
I think for me, I was just thinking, I haven't felt like Crosby has been that dominant. And I think he's off to a slow start. Not that he's not going to turn it around. And I'm not saying that this guy deserves any super criticism or anything like that. But it's just he hasn't yet dominated. I mean, early in the series,
we want to be physical, we want to get hard on the forecheck.
But I would say going down the stretch of the regular season, when they had a really crucial game against another team that was in the thick of the race with them,
realize that we're coming. And I think a big thing in this series, which I didn't take into account going in, was how effective their I think it's Penguins. Their fourth line is arguably their best line on their team. I don't think you can say that for any other line, any other fourth line in the NHL. But they have played a lot of minutes. I think right there with Barzal has been like Clutterbuck and Matt Martin and these guys, and they have been really a big part of what Trotz wants to do in terms of playing the Penguins. And I think he just kind of has that experience, and he's also taken a little bit, I think, of what other teams have done and mixed it into how to beat the Penguins, because let's face it, the Penguins have played elite team after elite team after elite team for the last forever. So they kind of see the same strategies, what works, what doesn't work, and I think he's taken the best of everything and tried to make it work with the Islanders this year.
And when you're a coach in the playoffs and you have four lines you can really trust, you got a good chance of going deep.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you look at Colorado as an example and how much they had to play McKinnon, Landeskog, and Rantanen in the first game. When you're playing in Connor McDavid type of minutes, I think that's a bit of a problem, and I do think that's been an underestimated thing with the Islanders so far.
I think with the Islanders, it's kind of like the Golden Knights last year. Like they don't have, I guess they have Barzal, but outside of him, they don't really have any superstars. They just kind of have four lines that are pretty good, and in a way, it kind of helped them that Tavares left because they were able to add to their depth on their team. And they have four good lines, like you guys brought up, and they don't really have a weakness. Like, it's not like the Penguins' fourth line is played poorly. It's just the Islanders' fourth line is like a third line when the Penguins is an actual fourth line. So it's kind of like the Golden Knights in that way.
And the way it's set up right now, I mean, you have some new people starting to emerge as key players, such as Jordan Eberle, right? I mean, he's had a great series so far, and as you say, there isn't that big star outside of Barzal, and so other people are grabbing this opportunity now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think also Robin, what a story Robin Leonard is. This was a guy that was a former backup in Buffalo. He was pretty much, has been a castaway, and this guy is basically in the William Jennings trophy conversation now for best goals against average. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, goaltenders are weird, man. They just get hot, and it happens for them.
Yeah.
That's how it happens in the Stanley Cup playoffs. You remember Halak?
Oh, yeah.
2010? Same thing.
Well, so Kevin, that's probably a little segue for the Calgary Flames here.
Yes, because all of a sudden, 5 weeks ago, Mike Smith was booed out of the building on Jerome McGinley's retirement night because he made not one, but 2 terrible passes. And this week, during Game 1 on Thursday, there was the chance of Smitty. And the Calgary Flames won. I think on the scoreboard it looked a little bit more convincing than it did on the ice. 4-0 with an empty net goal from Matthew Tkachuk. We'll bounce back to the East here in a second, but kind of what are your guys' thoughts in terms of what you saw from the Flames? What are you expecting in this series? How long are you thinking this goes? What happens tonight?
I just think that it's kind of going the same way I predicted it to. This is one of the series that, at least through the first game, it played out the way that I thought. I think the Flames are just a lot deeper. The thing with the Avalanche is they have one line, basically, and they have some really good players, but those really good players are not going to win you much more than one game in a series against a top-tier team. And the Flames, as long as they keep getting the goaltending, which played well in the first game, they'll be fine and they'll win this easily. I don't see this going maximum 6, but probably 5 games, maybe even a sweep, to be honest.
I would say that Game 1 was a very reassuring start if you're a Calgary Flames supporter. Everything you wanted to see occurred there. Supporting cast, scoring goals, Matthew Tkachuk being a big factor, the goaltending being super solid. Everything you wanted to see occurred there in Game 1, I think. So now it's just a matter of keeping the momentum rolling. I totally agree on the Avalanche. We've seen that in various points of the regular season where they're leaning hard on that one line and not succeeding. And it makes you wonder, are they working them too hard?
Yeah, you can't be playing 25 minutes a night as a forward. I just don't think that works.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting. It is one game with. It's just still. Mike Smith has been really strong down the stretch, so I'm not incredibly worried, and this guy seems ready. But you do never know. In terms of that's I think interesting.
I was just going to say, Kevin, we talk about 4 lines with the Islanders. Well, there's 4 lines there with the Calgary Flames, so much so that the coach doesn't even want to call them 1 through 4. He's just got his lines. But, that same thing there. There's a lot of trust in all of the forwards to perform.
Yeah, and really, I think Derek Ryan, Andrew Mangiapane, and Garnet Hathaway actually, I think, have almost become the third line on the Flames. Derek Ryan has been a find. I can't say enough about this guy. You can move him up and down the lineup. Garnet Hathaway is a gritty guy. And Andrew Mangiapane, the second half of the year, this guy has really started to come into his own. That goal on Philip Grubauer, was just, what a stretch there. But yeah, that line has been at the very least the most consistent this year, and especially in the second half. And it bodes well, I think. It bodes well. Did anyone else have anything else to say on that, or?
No, we can move on to the next matchup.
Right. Just as a reminder, though, for those listening, Matt Dubourg and I will recap Game 2 tonight between the Flames and the Avalanche. That will be on Facebook Live and the podcast as well. I think let's hop back to the East, because I think that there is a couple of really interesting stories there before we get to the Winnipeg Jets. So the Tampa Bay Lightning were up 3-0. And everything was looking hunky-dory until the Columbus Blue Jackets have basically scored 4 straight to come back and win. And then last night, flattened the Tampa Bay Lightning 5-1. What is this just a team, Tampa, a team that is, after 62 wins, one of the best regular season in the NHL, just trying to get their footing back in some meaningful games here. And we saw last year a team that Columbus said was up 2-0 in Washington. Washington turned around and won. Or are you panicked about the Tampa Bay Lightning?
I think it's more the Columbus Blue Jackets. I think a lot of people are talking about how the Lightning suck and they choke all the time. But if you really look at Columbus's roster, Columbus is really talented. And so is, I know that I always bring this up to you, Kev, the Metro Division is very talented. And I think that's the worst thing that could have happened to Tampa was having to play one of these Metro teams because they're going to play you hard. I think Torts has done a great job, and they're finally starting to get some production out of these guys that they got at the trade deadline, out of some of these players that are on their roster that they weren't really getting that production out of until now. As for the Lightning, I think part of it might be a little bit of rust. Part of it might be just taking them lightly a little bit. Part of it might be the hype. I don't really know exactly because there's no excuses on paper. Like, they have the best team in the NHL on paper, so it's really tough. But maybe there's just that team in the NHL, like the Jackets. Everybody has one of these where it's just not a good matchup for them. Maybe the Columbus Blue Jackets are that matchup.
Yeah, and Columbus sure loves this underdog role too. Like, they're not even hiding that. Like, it's set up well for them. Now the question is, of course, a change of venue changes the feel of the series a little bit. Columbus goes home now with some expectation on them. Now that they got this 2-0 lead, not an expectation of a sweep, but the expectation of winning the series, which wasn't really there for many people at the start. So that'll change the dynamic a little bit. And also we'll see how Tampa Bay performs now that they're up against it. And they're going to have to play Game 3 without Nikita Kucherov,
yes,
who was handed a 1-game suspension today for that late hit in Game 2. And we'll see how they respond. I mean, they got a lot of talent there and a lot of experience and a great coach. It's going to be tested like never before.
I think the another underestimated thing has been Matt Duchene, 4 points last night. This was a guy that had this anchor on him that he's not a guy that can put a team in the playoffs. That was when Columbus got him and they got off to that slow start. That was everybody's question, and now I think that has been good. But as big as this game is for the Lightning, I think that this big game is actually in a lot of ways bigger for Columbus because they had that 2-0 lead last year. That game went into overtime. They could have been up 3-0 on the Washington Capitals and did not. So I think it's fair to say that I think the winner of Game 3 might actually win this series. I think I'd be willing to say that because it'll be next to impossible to come back from 3-0. It has been done before, but
that would be a good bet.
Yeah. I mean, Game 3, even when there's a split in a series to start the first two games, Game 3 really is the series in a lot of cases.
I think you could say the same thing about the Penguins series, by the way.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think that's fair. Although if I'm the Pens, I don't like going home 2-0 down 2-0 because you don't have that home ice advantage that the.
I don't think anyone does.
Yeah, no, that's fair. No, but yeah, I mean, we'll get to Winnipeg in a second. I think that's interesting. So Mitch, in Toronto, like, how are parade plans now? With they've pretty much locked in. Like, before it was pencil, now it's like Sharpie. Yeah.
You're past the ballpoint right onto the Sharpie, eh?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's no pen involved. So basically, the Raptors are going to start from the west, and then the Leafs are going to start from the east, and they're going to meet up somewhere in the middle.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, probably right around Ryerson here, I think.
Oh, that'll be neat.
Yeah, it'll be nice.
Will there be a statue of Kawhi Leonard and Mitch Marner?
Mitch Marner, I don't know. They might have to wait a little bit on Kawhi because if they don't sign him, they'll have to take the statue down. Mitch Marner for sure, though.
Yeah. in all seriousness, though, for the Maple Leafs, I thought, for everyone that was picking and I'm one of them, I'm still picking the Bruins. They looked like the younger, faster team in Game 1. I was shocked.
Which they are.
I was shocked how old the Bruins looked.
Well, the thing with me was it wasn't necessarily speed or skill, because the Leafs are more speedy. They have more speed, and they're better skill-wise. It's just the defense, the inconsistency, and the Bruins just sort of have those players that know how to play in the playoffs. And they have that one line that's pretty much unstoppable against the Leafs, which is what I thought would happen. Of course, it's only been one game, so we'll see. But that's the thing about the Leafs. They can play one great game, but can they be consistent for these 4 that they need to win?
Yeah, and then on that note, can Freddie Anderson continue to provide, that lights-out play? If he can be a wall back there, the Leafs will play with a ton of confidence, and with the speed and skill that they have, they got a great chance. But it is only just the one game, and Boston's playoff pedigree just always would scare me if I were a Maple Leaf fan.
Yeah, that's the one thing. I mean, I do feel that they're living a little bit I think they think they're living rent-free in Toronto's head, but this series is going to come down between Mitch Marner and Brad Marchand, I feel. And I think the better of these two, whoever is the better player in the series, I think is going to end up winning this. I think winning the series. And I found it quite interesting that Marchand didn't think that this series would be tough. I found that comment to be quite fascinating to me, because it's a little weird that a team would be that unprepared. But tonight's going to be a really interesting night. I think that this is going to be a rough night in terms of physicality. I think the Bruins are going to take the physicality to them. But so that.
Oh, and the Garden will be extra charged up. It's an 8:00 start. A little extra time.
Yeah.
Get those drinks in you.
Yeah, totally. And Tuukka Rask has had a struggle in the playoffs and he was not good last game either, so he does need to be better as well. But that's interesting. I don't know if there's much really to talk about yet between Washington and Carolina. I think that series will get more interesting when it's in Carolina, and then we get to see a Carolina celebration.
Carolina fans are going to have to come out hard. It's the only way they're going to win that series.
Yeah. I can see that. Vegas, San Jose, what have been your thoughts? It's felt like it was pretty much all San Jose game 1 and pretty much all Vegas game 2, and Martin Jones looked normal. Was kind of my impression.
I think it just speaks to how even these teams are. I think it just comes down to not necessarily goaltending, but I think it comes down to the Sharks' goaltending. If Martin Jones can play like he did in the first game and not give up 5 goals on 20 shots or whatever the heck it was in the second game, then I think they can win. But I picked the Sharks in 7, so I think this series is going to go the distance. They're very even.
They're very even. But
a lot of scoring for a Western Conference matchup too.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So really, it does speak to how evenly matched the teams are. You get behind by a few goals, you don't feel like you're ever out of the game. Makes for great watching, for sure.
Yeah,
we'll see. I mean, the Sharks. I don't know. I feel like they're one of the under the radar teams a little bit, just without how much other teams get talked about. But they are, they're not in this position by accident. They got a solid squad there.
They do, yeah. So I think it's going to be interesting, and also I think going back to Vegas, I think will be interesting for them as well. What's wrong with the Winnipeg Jets? Or maybe let me ask this differently. Did we just are we thinking too highly of the Winnipeg Jets? And did we
they played really poorly over the last stretch of the season. So, and the Blues have been playing very well, plus they have sort of a hot goalie right now.
Yes.
I think it's more about the Blues being hot, and the Jets, I think the Jets have kind of just cooled down a little bit. I don't know, because I've always found the Jets to be very skilled, yet very volatile. So, I don't know. I think it's really, really, really bad for them that they dropped 2 at home, because that's kind of been the place where they've been so dominant over the past couple of years.
Yeah, and the other thing is, too, is Line A's been producing, and they're still not winning. So that's a concern. I mean, I'm just going to go ahead and straight up say it. I mean, goaltending, they're losing the goaltending battle. I mean, Hellebuck was not very good last night.
No.
And Binnington, for a rookie, comes in the first game and plays super awesome. So forget about playoff jitters. Those don't appear to be an issue, and follows it up with another strong performance.
Yeah, and he also got the Vancouver Canucks fan base angry. Well, Don Cherry did with his Rookie of the Year comment. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Ron McLean tried to correct him, but,
there's no correcting Don.
Yeah, no, of course not. But, yeah, and 5 of the 6 goals that Hellebuck allowed has been on the blocker side. So I think they're seeing a weakness there as well. And I did pick St. Louis to win this series, so I'm not necessarily super surprised that they're up 2-0. I thought it would at least be a split, but that's another interesting game 3 that's going to happen tomorrow, I think. I mean, I do think Winnipeg wins game 3, but I still think St. Louis, that's one of those that Winnipeg can win game 3, and St. Louis can win the series still. So, but
I thought they would win game 2. So
who, Winnipeg?
Yeah.
I didn't think it'd be 2-0 for either team through 2 games.
Yeah, I thought this series was going to go really deep.
Yeah, it still could though.
Yeah,
still could.
It could, but
it
based
could,
on
but I don't think it will.
Doesn't look like it. Yeah.
I think it's going to be pretty short. Actually, I think Winnipeg is just going to kind of collapse. I can see it now.
That'll be, and then go ahead, Tyler.
Sportsnet showed the graphic during the telecast last night in regards to Hellebuck. If you go back to last year's playoffs, that is now 6 straight losses.
That's right, because they won the first game.
Not awful, but so.
Yeah, and the whispers around Paul Maurice is interesting too, which I've always liked as a coach. I think he's a good coach, but I wonder if, and I wouldn't necessarily fire this guy, but there's some interesting whispers around him. But we will.
Well, that's for the offseason.
That's for the offseason. We will not worry about that. And then Dallas 1-0 on Nashville. Ben Bishop is 9-0-1 and 1.90 in his last 10 games. I think that a lot of people underestimated Dallas here and maybe overrated Nashville. I still have Nashville winning this series, but this is not going to be as easy as people think.
Obviously not. And shout out to Dilly Vanilli, biggest Dallas fan I know.
Yes.
So as far as Dallas is concerned, obviously they got the goaltending. I think a couple players that are being underrated is just their defense in general. I think a lot of the names on their defense aren't really big names, and people are kind of not really looking at that. Obviously, Nashville is known for their defense, and first game, I guess 3-1. But the thing with Nashville has always been for me that they can't score with any consistency. They have to win every game 2-1, maybe 3-2. That's how they win their games. If Rene isn't on fire and if their defense isn't really rock solid, then their offense really can't just win a game 5-4, which I think is going to be an issue if Dallas is able to score on a consistent basis. And I think a guy like Radulov, who hasn't got a lot of credit this year, I think has played very well as well.
Yes. The Russian God. The
Russian God, my boy.
And also Mika Heiskanen is a guy I think that we'll be hearing a lot more of. He was a guy that Ottawa wanted for Erik Karlsson, and Dallas said absolutely no way, no how are we giving this guy up? And I think we saw that so far. And I thought Dallas would be a tougher matchup for the Flames than Colorado was. And so far I'm proven a little bit right, but
I agree.
Through the first game of the Dallas-Nashville series, I haven't seen enough yet to sort of get a sense of where the series is headed. It looks like a pretty even matchup, though.
Yeah.
That's the thing with Nashville. On to that point of they don't score a lot. They make every series seem even because they don't score.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah. Other than that sweep of Chicago a couple years ago, yeah, they've found a way to keep it. They seem to find a way to keep it even. Is there anything going under the radar on these playoffs that we want to catch up on, or is it too early at this point to see what the storyline is? Any underrated storylines?
I think the underrated storyline, I don't know if there's a storyline necessarily. I think the underrated team right now is probably Washington. I don't think enough people are talking about the fact that they won the Stanley Cup last year. Yeah. And Tampa Bay is basically folding, and Washington is now up 2-0 against the Hurricanes in Game 2, and they just seem like they're going to kind of stroll through the playoffs if
it was like this
the Islanders
all season.
Or Pittsburgh do anything.
It was like this all season long. Like there was always this talk about Tampa Bay and Boston and Toronto, and then you get to Washington.
Yeah, Yeah, it is interesting because, I mean, Tampa Bay got the attention because of 62 wins, and Boston and Toronto got the attention because they're Boston and Toronto, and the markets allowed that. But, yeah, Washington...
And because of the division, Kev.
Yeah.
What, their division?
The Atlantic Division is significantly worse than the Metro Division.
Probably. Well, I would agree with that, but in terms of, like, attention...
Well, it helps them, like... compile more wins. That's why the Bruins were second in the league in wins in the East, and that's why the Leafs had all these points. Like the Capitals, Islanders, and Penguins all had 100 points. The Penguins finished third, and then you go down, you keep dropping down, and there's two other teams with 98 points, 99 points, and it's just like a lot more depth in that division. I think just they play more competitive hockey throughout the year, which allows them to be ready for the playoffs, which I think has helped Washington and the Islanders in these playoffs.
Yeah, it's interesting because it was under
and Columbus.
And it was undervalued, I think, because how good that division is, I think, nationally. But I do see where you're coming from there. But Finland beat Canada in the World's Women Hockey Championships. 5-2. And there's been a lot of talk about women's hockey. So, Tyler, maybe your reaction, first of all, to the win that Finland had over Canada and how significant that is.
I guess the reaction there is not again with Finland. Like they're just like, for Canada, it's just this thorn in the side now at every level of international competition, it seems like. But it was only a matter of time before another team was going to pull off a semifinal upset in an international tournament, and it won't be Canada versus the United States in the final this time.
Yeah. Yes, and I think that's good for women's hockey. I mean, I know that is Canadian. It feels like I'm sinning against my country, but in terms of...
It definitely is, Kev, because they need more than two teams. It's kind of predictable at this point.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. I know that nobody here would even know this, but it's the same thing with lacrosse. Like at the national level, it's just Canada and the U.S. and they just play each other all the time, and there's nobody else to even come close.
Yeah.
So that's the same with women's hockey at this point. They need other teams to be competitive to make the whole national scale a little bit more intriguing. Because even at the men's level, I know Canada is so dominant, but there's other teams that can play, like Sweden, Finland, Czech Republic, all these different teams that are competitive. So
yeah. Mitch, your perspective, though, because you were mentioning to me privately that one of your professors and instructors was involved in the CWHL.
Yes.
What, from your perspective, happened? What worked, and why did this not work?
Kevel, we talk about this every week, so I'm well versed in this. There's CWHL. I just feel like the business model was old. They continued to, at least when we would discuss it, they continued to sort of complain that things weren't going well for them because people weren't helping them. Like they kind of felt like they were entitled to some support. And then Sportsnet ends up giving them some support by putting them on TV a couple of times a year. But they're not really drawing any audience. So it's very difficult in the business landscape when a product is not drawing an audience beforehand, even in the attendance at the arena, to put you on TV and to justify it when they're not making any money, when they could just put a random game on the NHL, like Buffalo versus whoever, Detroit, whatever, and they could make more money and they could bring in more of a profit. So I think a lot of the CWHL, they were kind of feeling entitled to getting some TV revenue and getting TV broadcasting rights when they were looking at it all wrong, I really feel like, because today, Kev, that you can market a company or market a product in so many new different ways. And I think that is what the other league has done so well for the women, is they've tried different avenues of streaming and different avenues of marketing. And I think the CWHL, they're just too in the old school approach of things to get everything on TV, and that they weren't really focusing on building the characters in the league and just getting people interested in the teams and the players within it, and then going from there and marketing on Instagram or Twitter or streaming on different services and getting a fan base that way instead of just going the traditional route, which I think was, in the end game, their downfall.
This is a similar thing to U Sports getting more coverage in Canada and on getting games on TV, like on a Sportsnet or a TSN. It's the same thing. Is that their numbers just aren't there to justify putting them on the air over something else with all the production cost involved. And, the marketing hasn't been that great.
Yeah, we talked about this last week, Mitch. Well, one of the ideas that I brought forward is it would be great if Sean brought this forward, that I think it would be great that if a Sportsnet and TSN kind of babied this the way that they did the CFL, TSN did the CFL, which is now, it's a good ratings thing for TSN. It's not a masterful ratings in terms of everything, but they've done a pretty good job in marketing the CFL on a traditional market. There's still some work that needs to be done, no question. Sportsnet hasn't. I would argue that I didn't think that Sportsnet necessarily, and I think that you're right in terms of you need to prove the numbers to see it, but it would be nice if Sportsnet...
But Kev, it's tough to even get, I think Sportsnet just putting them on air when it didn't really justify, the product didn't justify being on air, was a great step of at least trying to do something to help this product. They put them on... They put on the All-Star game. They put on a couple of other games. And I know a lot of people were complaining that the All-Star game was at the same time as the AFC Championship or whatever. Yeah. But that more people are watching TV then. So maybe there's a chance that they scroll over and see the CWHL game instead of just a regular time. But I don't know.
If you market it as part of the hometown hockey package, that you add, and as part of it, some highlights of women's hockey during the week or a game, I think that does help.
Sure, I think maybe highlight, at the highlight level, but in terms of the broadcasting level, I don't really understand kind of the beef there. But when it comes to the highlights and kind of just the marketing, possibly they could have done a better job on CBC or Sportsnet to market it better. But again, I just feel like you have this thing in your hand all the time, your phone, and you can market whatever you want on that and possibly grab a different fan base, maybe a younger fan base, the fan base that's really interested in growing women's sport for the most part. I don't know. I just think they missed the boat with it.
Well, yeah, it's an interesting thing with women's hockey, and I feel the OHL doesn't have this problem as much as the WHL does, in finding ways, and U Sports, and finding other ways to get their product out there other than the traditional way. I think that's something that I think will be thought about. I don't know if this is a federal election issue or not. I'm not trying to be political, but I think it's interesting to see where the CRTC kind of fits in this, because I think we are moving. I feel like Canada is behind in a non-traditional media setting in the U.S. I think that there needs to be more open valves to that. I think it's happening more often, and I think the CRTC needs to catch up on that myself. And I think a lot of leagues need to catch up on those kind of options as well and allow that, in my opinion. But
yeah, well, the U.S. is always going to be ahead of Canada. I don't think there's a debate there.
No, of course, I'm not saying that we catch up to the U.S., but I think that there needs to be improvement on what is.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I just think, I think with the whole TV industry, they're sort of behind.
Yeah.
in general.
Yeah. Tyler, were you going to say something there?
Yeah, I would totally agree. I mean, the television broadcasting in particular is really struggling to maintain that model, have it be profitable, compete against streaming services. There's a big challenge there for sure.
Yeah.
Really, if it's not sports, it doesn't
tough.
really sell.
Yeah.
Because that's the only thing that anyone wants to watch live on TV.
Yeah. Everything else you can stream. Well, let's leave it there. Mitch, you probably got a lot of things going on with the Bottom Line View coming up.
I do.
12 days of the draft.
I've been a little behind here because I've been really busy with school, but I will be releasing tonight, actually. I don't know when this podcast comes out, so on Saturday, there will be another draft video, rankings. I am going to have a mock draft very soon. But yeah, everything NFL is on the Bottom Line View. Check it out. On Hot Take Hockey, which is my buddy John's channel, I'm also on there doing a lot of the Penguins stuff and specifically the recaps for their games, and I'll probably jump on some other stuff if they get eliminated quickly. But you can check out Hot Take Hockey as well if you're a hockey fan, of course, listening to this. Go over there. Great YouTube content, very short kind of stuff, a lot of recaps, reactions, a lot of live chats, just different hockey content that I think they're doing very well over there, and I'm kind of just helping them out.
Yeah. Cool. Tyler, where do we follow you? What's going on?
I'm on Twitter at TNoble, TNOBLE, and certainly looking forward to a hockey night in Canada. Saturday night doubleheader out here on the West Coast at 5 o'clock for the Leafs and Bruins, and then right after, at I'm guessing around 7:45, the start of the Calgary-Colorado game.
Yes, and Matt DeBorg and I will be recapping that on Facebook Live and YouTube as well, and on the podcast, so check that out. Thanks, guys, for joining. Thanks for your patience. We've had some technical issues in this one on my end, but we are done now, and we will talk to you all very soon. Bye for now.